All right, Job chapter 41, let's call this one, What Can You Do at Sea? Not so much as a picture of God challenging Job to help us understand his seafaring skills, but as we talked about in the last chapter, it is God helping Job to understand the limits of his ability by confronting him with creatures that he can't control. This one being Leviathan, once again like Behemoth, a creature that does not seem similar to anything that we know today, but the point still remains. Job has vast limits to his power on land, and probably even more vast limits to his abilities at sea. Leviathan being the example here, as God is going to help Job understand through questions. Okay, Job, what can you do to reel in Leviathan, as if you would be able to catch him with a hook in his mouth or a rope around his neck to drag him in as your pet? He's going to say, can you actually leash him? Or even if you can't overpower him, can you charm him in the way you might be able to, say, charm a snake, like a cobra, or something that you already know is potentially dangerous, but still you can outskill? It's like, I don't think that's going to work with Leviathan. Moreover, are you going to be able to ask Mrs. Job, what do you have a taste for, Mrs. Job? Would Leviathan actually be on the menu? No, because if you can't catch him, you can't divide him up in your markets and make him what's for dinner. And beyond that, he is not built in a way that you can tangle with, much less subdue, because his physical build makes your conventional weapons pointless. Beyond his physical size, he has a level of power and presence that you really don't want to contend with. Why? Because even the mighty wilt at the thought of rousing him. They'd rather just leave him alone, which is going to lead God to observe, okay, if mankind is scared to even rouse Leviathan, what makes you believe that you could stand in his presence? Helping us to understand even more as God goes on. It's not simply his size and his presence, but it is quite naturally the way that he is able to distort the sea around him. So he has ability that goes beyond mere clumsy power into a skill that makes him even more difficult to deal with. And ultimately, he runs in his own lane. He says there is no creature like Leviathan, that even though the horse might be courageous, Leviathan is an animal that stands above all the rest, living without fear. Helping us to understand why God at the end of the chapter is going to go on to say he is actually the king of all those who are proud. Ironically enough, ending up his statement in roughly the same place that Elihu ended up his, when he observed, look, Job, God does not well regard or respond well to any who are wise or proud in their own hearts. And so, as we said, I didn't go into a lot of the parallels between Elihu's statements to Job and God's own statements to Job, but God, much like Elihu, has challenged Job with two questions. Job, what do you know? And Job, what can you do? In helping Job to understand some of the practical benefits of leveling up his humility, understanding that, once again, Job was not in this circumstance because he was an especially proud man or because he sinned at all, but like we said, much like Hebrews, the book of Hebrews, chapter 2, describes Jesus as having no sin, but still enduring a process through which God perfected him by the things that he suffered. So in Job, we may once again be getting a picture of likewise how in mankind, God can help level up our character through sufferings that have nothing to do with anything that we've actually done wrong. This time in Leviathan, quite possibly being more than just a literal description of things that are outside Job's power, quite possibly symbolizing the way in which Job's situation is beyond his power. A situation in which no matter how much he fights, he is not going to be able to subdue it, and he is not necessarily going to be able to force answers out of the injustice or the pain of the situation he finds himself in. Quite possibly bringing us back to one of our recurring themes throughout the book of Job, and that is when we reach times or issues in our life that seem insurmountable or virtually immovable. How are we doing in the waiting? And I say that with a heavy heart, understanding that as easy as it is for me to say, it is super difficult to negotiate when you are stuck in a situation beyond your control. But As God is confronting Job with the reality of both the physical Leviathan and the Leviathan in his circumstance, understand that the win for Job is he's actually hearing from God. And as much as God has hit Job with some harsh realities in the next chapter, he is about to pick him up, dust him off, and set him forward on 140 years that are far greater than all of the prosperity he has seen to this point. Understanding that in enjoying that next 140 years of unparalleled blessings, at least blessings that are unparalleled in comparison to all of the blessings and the riches that he had in the first half of his life, Job is poised to enjoy that 140 years with a level of character that will allow him to enjoy his latter years far more than he was able to even enjoy the former.